Nice, buddy. I'm live, Huddy. I'm on TV right now. We're streaming, waiting for people to join. Did we press public? You're my boy. My boy. Yep. Well, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Just going to wait for a few more people to join here.
I love you.
Oh, thanks, Huddy. That was very nice. Um, it is doing a live chat, and actually, I'm doing back-to-back live chats. My producer here, Tori, do you want to say hi? She doesn't want to say hi, but she actually has been helping me set everything up. So I have two ideas that I want to do for my live chats. One is I want to just like tell the story about how I became a professional YouTuber, filmmaker, and that kind of thing. Because a lot of people ask me, how do you get into this? How does one pursue a career in what you do? And the other one, which I think is very timely, is talking about winter. So I thought I was going to be telling my professional YouTuber story, and Tori thought I was going to be talking about winter. So I think I'm going to be talking about winter today, and I'll get a little personal with the other story tomorrow. But yeah, welcome everybody. Happy holidays. I'm going to start this little adventure with my personal beer. This is Windbound Campfire Pilsner, and it's brewed by Muskoka Brewery. And this is actually a lightly smoked Pilsner. And you can pick it up at Muskoka Brewery's Tap House in Bracebridge, Ontario, or you can get it at the LCBO stores in Ontario in Muskoka Brewery's Survival Pack, which is a mixer pack. Anyways, so now, at least where I live, and a lot of Canada, except when you get further north, it's kind of the shoulder season. And we have a ton of snow here. We got dumped on over the weekend, and the lakes aren't really frozen up yet to be safe enough to walk on quite yet. And a lot of people are sort of itching to get out, but we're sort of in between the two seasons. You can't really go anywhere where I live if you're not like if you for the most part you can't snowmobile anywhere, do any really major treks in most of northern Ontario until the lakes are frozen up because there's just so much water. Same thing with why it's canoe country in the summer. You can't you want to be paddling and portaging. But the first thing that everybody asks me is like, why I don't want to get out in winter. It's too cold. I can't handle it. Like too much misery and too much prep and oh I don't think I can't handle the cold. And actually, I get that, but also I don't think people realize that you're not usually getting cold out there. And it like if you're cold tenting, you're going to have that period in the morning where you're changing from your sleeping bag into your clothes, and that can be cold. Not dangerous, but it can be kind of miserable. But for the most part, the kind of winter camping that I do now is hot tenting. So I have a wood stove and a canvas tent of some kind that I could heat with wood, and that really gets nice and toasty warm. And whether you're trekking or snowmobiling or however you're traveling, if you dress warm enough, especially when you're moving around, you get to camp, you're moving, you're cutting wood, you're setting up camp, you're tamping down, the snow, and then you're getting a fire going, whether it's outside or inside the tent. So um, when you're not moving around, you're warmed by a fire, and then the important thing is you have a really good ground pad and a really good sleeping bag. So you get a sleeping bag that's good till -30 -40 and a really good ground pad. You invest in that, And to be honest with you, you will be surprisingly not cold. Like I used to actually bring on my winter camping trips. These are treks, not ones where I'm snowmobiling, but ones where I'm physically walking. And I bring a large down, like Canada Goose jacket on these trips. And literally, I wouldn't even wear it the whole time. And, on some of my Arctic treks, I'd bring that big down jacket with me. I'd strap it to the outside of my toboggan. And when I'd stop, let's say to eat lunch, I'd put it on. Or when I got to camp, I'd put that on. But outside of the Arctic, I'm literally not even wearing that. And I'm literally not even having to wear a big bulky jacket at all, just because I have the heat from the fire and the heat from the tent. So that's something probably most people would be, shocked to kind of hear about. And I think an important thing when we start talking about winter for sure is clothing. Everybody, by the way, thanks for jumping in here. I think I'm definitely going to be doing a Q&A too. So I'm not going to go on for too long, and I'll answer questions, different questions. Obviously we're going to keep it towards the outdoors, winter, but other questions that are outdoor adventure related, filmmaking, all that kind of stuff. So I'll do that in a bit, but I'm going to talk about clothing now, and how that's an important thing when it comes to winter time. One of the things that I think is key that a lot of people don't think about is wearing baggy clothes. A little bit baggier is a good idea. And the reason having clothes that are baggier, not even a little bit baggier, a little bit more than a little bit baggy, is because first of all, if they're your outer layer, you can layer up more underneath it, and the your clothing's not going to be so tight. But even more so because as you move, clothing that's a little bit baggier can actually express moisture a little bit better. So as you walk, and you're stepping, that moisture that builds up from your own body heat and sweat can move through the fabric much better. That's why breathable is such a good thing to have. So, you're looking at materials. A good merino wool or poly base layer is good. Merino wool is pretty spendy. It's definitely better. So if you don't want to jump spring for merino wool, wear something that's polypropylene or something that's definitely not cotton. That's the big no. And so you're wearing that against your skin, and you're dressing in layers, and that way, as you travel, you can take on and put on layers, and that way you don't overheat, and that way you don't build up a sweat, because it's sweat that's really bad. And there's a bit of a misnomer that says like, oh, if you sweat out there in the winter, you're gonna die. That's true in like extreme Arctic environments. Okay, particularly where you don't have a second change of clothes, and where you might not be able to have any heat source whatsoever. On my Arctic trips, there were times that I sweat. Um, but and I would recommend this for anybody, always kept a dry set of base layers and a dry set of clothes for like emergencies, right? So essentially, yeah, I'd bring like three, and one would be an emergency, and the other two I'd sort of alternate between. And I did have a little stove when I'm up in the Arctic, and I use that, just a Coleman double burner stove in my small canvas tent, which was ventilated really well. I would never leave the stove running all night, but I'd kind of hang things up and run that a bit just to dry them out a little bit. And then I'd have one pair of clothes that I slept in, and then one pair of clothes that I trekked in. And in the morning, I'd wake up, put my damp clothes on, and go. And then I'd always change to dry stuff. And then I would have one extra emergency pair as well for those Arctic trips. But when you're so I could a bit because I had that he sorts I had spare clothes, but still much more dangerous, much more frowned upon. And if you're going way back in the day, to a time where you might only have one pair of clothes, you don't have a heat source, like you have a coodlet to what the Inuit use to light up their snow houses, and to provide a little heat or for melting snow into water. You really can die if you sweat. But when you're in where there's trees and firewood around, it's really just not the case because you can get a fire going and you can dry out your clothes. So I've done some pretty intense bushwhacks and well, not just bushwhacks, but even backpacking trips. Like I did the coastal hiking trail, north shore of Lake Superior in the winter. Actually, there's a big winter trek where you don't have to cross any lakes. Um, but way I did that was the same thing. I had heavy backpack. I strapped a toboggan to the outside back of my backpack. That's a great way to do things if you're going to be doing a trip where, 'cause most of the time around me, anyways, the winter camping routes, they're just following the canoe routes, right? And that's the traditionally with the Nassaugon, what which means roots essentially, um, is they were traveled in both summer and winter. But if you ever get into a situation where you're potentially and for those for the most part when you're traveling on those traditional canoe portage routes in the winter, you can haul a freighter toboggan through there. But if you're doing something that's like more of a backpacking trail, okay, or you're doing something where you're going to be bushwhacking, at times, it's best to bring a backpacking style backpack, okay, and essentially have a toboggan strapped to the outside back of that. Um, is pretty much the way to go if you're going to be traveling like that. Also, another thing, if you want to bring a small canvas tent and wood stove, is a frame pouch. Works great for that as well. And then what you do is when you're bushwhacking or when you're on a part of the trail where you can drag a toboggan, you throw your pack down, and then when you have to pick it up, you just pick it right back up and put it on your back, and you just kind of use a bungee to strap the sides of the toboggan to the pack, and then you can just transition between those two things, which is great. But yeah, so typically what I've done on trips like that, I'm going by the time I get to where I'm going to go, I'm like dumping sweat and it's minus 30 out. But, you make sure that you don't push yourself to the point of exhaustion. And what you do is you have your axe and your saw. And as soon as you get to where you're going to camp, you get to work and you start chopping wood. And when you're chopping wood, that keeps you warm. And then you get a big fire going. And as soon as you get your fire going, you change your clothes and then you change into your dry clothes. And then you have to dry out your wet clothes. So if you're going to be really sweating, be prepared to sit around a fire and dry out your clothes for a long time every day, which kind of a pain in the butt, but you can build sort of drying racks and stuff, but you're going to be just kind of holding your shirt up by the fire a lot, if you're sweating, but it's not the end of the world if you work up a heavy sweat. And then, and I'm talking about more of like a cold tenting scenario. If in those situations, if you do have a hot tent and you can hang your stuff up inside and just get that stove going, ripping hot, and hang stuff in on like up on the ridge pole or whatever over the fire, you can get your stuff nice and dry. Another thing that I've really learned that I can't say enough good things about is just like, people, what are the best kind of boots? Well, I typically for backcountry trips don't bring insulated rubber boots because when you don't have a place to go inside and a proper boot dryer, let's say, to dry out insulated rubber. So insulated rubbers can be pretty warm, but typically I don't bring anything that doesn't have a removable liner or called pack boots because you can pull that liner out of the boot and dry it off a lot more easily. Um, the only exception to that would be bunny boots. Some people don't think they're warm enough. Some people swear by them. I've never actually tried them, but I've had, they if you do get a soaker, the bunny boots are going to be uh, a lot better off because they don't have that removable liner. They're U.S. military grade winter boot. A lot of people wear them in Alaska, the Yukon. Some people wear them as well. But my personal experience is I wear, pack boots. So like Baffins is what I go with. and I sometimes will bring a backup pair of liners in case my liners get wet, especially if you're potentially going to be walking in some slushy conditions. It's a good idea to bring liners, but those liners you can pull out and dry off around a fire as well. If you have boots where you can't pull out the liner and you have to try to dry those boots around a fire, it's a problem. And the reason your wet boots are so bad in the winter is because you lose all the R value. They are not going to insulate. You can have a pair of boots that says they're good to 100 minus 100, and after a couple days, your feet are sweating. Your feet start to sweat, and your boots R value greatly declines. And the next time you know, your feet are freezing cold. But if you're really smart in the way I learned it, the best thing you can do, especially if you don't want cold feet and you don't want to deal with wet boots or wet boot liners, is you wear plastic bags in on your feet. Okay. And that I can't say how what a good thing this is. Before I got into the plastic bag tip, what I used to do is I used to pull my boot liners out every night and I'd wear them in my sleeping bag, or at least tuck those boot liners in my sleeping bag at night. And that way, when I came out, the next morning, my boots wouldn't be frozen solid because there's going to be moisture escaping your feet into your boot liners. And if you leave them out, they'll be frozen solid, especially after a couple days. And let me tell you, trying to put frozen solid boots on is not a very fun thing in the morning when you're cold tenting. Unless you're keeping them right by the wood stove and you're running the wood stove all night long, chances are your boots will be frozen, if not very cold. So, yeah, what I go with and is plastic bags over my feet. What will happen is your socks will get damp, but you can leave your boots out all night. There's no issue. And the other thing is, especially for trips where you're doing a lot of trekking, is that you will not get blisters. In the past, I remember just wearing big sorels and stuff before I got into the lighter Baffins when sorels were a thing. I remember just getting really bad blisters from walking so much in those. And it just does not happen. I walked, 360 kilometers across the Angava Peninsula, multiple tracks on foot where I walked really, really good distances with, I just use big Ziploc bags because they're more heavy duty over my feet. And, I've actually been in the backcountry in the Yukon in negative 38 temps with someone that has something called chill blains. And if anyone's knows that, it's essentially, long story short, you get much colder feet much more easily. And what they did was they actually put Ziploc bags right on their bare feet, and then they'd slap a toe warmer on top of the Ziploc bag, and then they would put their socks on. And I was told that was the ultimate. I wouldn't really like the feeling of having Ziploc bags right on my feet personally, but that also bypasses your socks getting cold. Um, you know, I don't know if anybody else is getting an ad here on this thing. That's weird. Maybe can I skip my own ad? I guess I enabled ads on that. Sorry about this. Anyways, yeah. So what was I gonna say? So yeah, big tip for winter guys. Boot liners over top of your, plastic bags on your boots all day. Now the other thing is what I would do. Do you want to? So let's say you're out there, you have a wood stove. It's really hot in your tent. As soon as that stove dies, of course, it gets really cold in your tent because there's no insulation. So yeah, there's a little bit like you're too hot in your tent or you're too cold in your tent. And if you have a proper little dampener, I forget whether it's the damper or the flue on the chimney. I think it's the damper. If you have a proper damper, you can and you have some good hardwood, you can get it to hover around a decent temperature once you're familiar with the stove and you have the right kind of wood and stuff like that. But ideally, you don't want to be personally waking up all night and stoking the fire to keep it warm in the tent because you just don't get as good as a sleep. So even when me, Tori, and the kids are out there and it's minus 25, we'll have some good down ground pads. Sometimes we'll put down boughs, and we won't run the stove in the night. And then I'll wake up, or Tori will wake up early in the cold and get that wood stove going, get the nice tent nice and warm, and then we all wake up once the fire's going. And the reason I prefer that is we have good sleeping bags. You know, you sleep with a toque on, and we're all huddled up there, and you really just get a better sleep. But if you want to be running the fire all night, there's a trick to it. See, the problem is what often happens when you're huddled up in your sleeping bag and you want to run the fire is that by the time you wake up from the cold, the fire is already out and you have to relight the fire when you're exhausted in the middle of the night. So, the best tip for that is that you just sleep with your sleeping bag off your shoulders. You sleep close to the fire, and then as soon as the sleeping bag, so so your shoulders are sort of exposed, you're close to the fire. That way, as soon as the fire dies off a bit, you'll wake up from the cold, and then you can just throw a couple more logs on and then go back to sleep. And that makes a huge difference with how well you sleep if you're going to be feeding the fire all night. So I think that's another great tip. And for tips that are like, for example, how I traveled in the Arctic when I did my Arctic treks, there's no wood around. So I'm bringing a small canvas tent and a double burner Coleman stove with me. I have a dog to help me pull because that's a little heavier than a lot of these Arctic trekker guys go with. Um, but that's a great way to travel. But again, for asphyxiation reasons, I don't have a chimney that's with a a draft in it, right? So you don't want to leave your stove going all night in a tent, even if it's canvas, even if it's ventilated. And plus, you don't have enough fuel to do that, not even close, right? So you got to ration your fuel. So what's a good idea is to in those situations is to just tuck your damp clothes inside your sleeping bag. So you're traveling all day. You have one set of clothes that's kind of damp. You do your best to get them dried out in the evening after putting on your nice dry clothes. You sleep in your nice dry clothes because trust me, you might think that your shirt doesn't have any moisture in it at all, but it does. Even if you think you haven't been sweating, and once it gets cold and you're sleeping like that, you'll catch a chill and you just won't be able to sleep properly. So you want nice dry clothes against your skin every time and a really good ground pad. And and so, yeah, you dry them out as best you can. Sometimes you might not be able to dry them out perfectly. And what you do is you take those clothes and you put them in your sleeping bag at night. And they'll actually dry out pretty good in your sleeping bag. Now, if they're wetter, if they're wetter than ideal, we'll say, you don't want too much moisture in your sleeping bag either. So, in that situation, what I've done in the past is I've taken those damp clothes, I've dried them out a little bit in the evening, and I've stuck them in a garbage bag and then put them in my sleeping bag. Now, if they're in a garbage bag, they won't dry out when they're in your sleeping bag at all as you're sleeping, unfortunately. And if it's not deep, deep cold, you can actually get away with getting the fire going, wearing a damp base layer to sleep, and that will actually dry out in the morning. But you got to have a good sleeping bag, again, a good sleeping bag if you do that. But they'll actually dry out a bit, even if you're not running the stove all night long, which is pretty good. It's a pretty good important tip to know. So these are just the kind of little things that you learn about that really keep you comfortable out there. I mean, they're typically not a life or death scenario. But there are those things when it comes to winter that are just beautiful. There's no bugs, right? There's very few people out there in the winter, so you're not bumping into other groups, nearly as often as you might be on summer trips and that kind of thing. One of the things that I've gotten into more recently since we had the kids is snowmobile winter camping. And my brother Ted and I, going back to let's say 2009 or 2010, actually did a big snowmobile trip from Delaney on Great Bear Lake all the way to across Great Bear Lake, across the western barren grounds to Kugluktuk, and then Kugluktuk on the Arctic coast, refueled and continued on way up across Victoria Island up to Uluhakto in the Arctic archipelago, and further north in all of Alaska, just the two of us camping out. So we learned a lot on that trip. We learned a lot from northern people, indigenous people, the Inuit and the Dene as well. So that was a great thing to do. And then I've done a good amount of trekking in the winter and winter camping as well. But I used to just use those store bought like kids toboggans, really. And sometimes I'd tether a whole bunch of those in a row. I'd get them. I'd pull out my knife. I'd sometimes buy one on the way, and I'd stab like little squares into the sides with my knife, and then just run a line through that. Strap my bags, boxes, whatever, back and forth, and like we actually did some pretty serious stuff with just that. I even had a little overflow plastic kids toboggan that was like pretty weather worn that I dragged on Baffin Island behind my main pulk, and it cracked from the brittleness of the snow, but actually lasted the entire trip. So you don't always need the most high end gear. Then I got into the freight toboggans. I did a trip up in Tamagami with a Whiskey Jack freight toboggan. Lure of the North makes them as well. Those are great, just for hauling your stuff. Toboggan is actually, anglicized version of Ojibwe word for toboggan. And so, I think traditionally in Europe they had like skis, like sleds, and but the toboggans with the curved front like that are North American indigenous people invented them. So that's pretty cool, and so they work great. They're the right width to fit in your snowmobile tracks as you're walking. You're essentially breaking trail for your toboggan. When you're up in the Arctic and in areas where or like on lakes where the snow's hard packed, anywhere where it's windy, if you're going to be traveling a lot like that, you don't need such a thin toboggan because it's not breaking into the snow so deeply, which is one of the reasons why people can do these like Antarctic winter treks and bring so much stuff, is because the snow's so hard packed. It's so much easier to haul stuff along the snow when it's almost like ice in a lot of situations, and that toboggan's not breaking down deep into it like that. So yeah, tents. You're definitely gonna want a canvas tent. I mean, people that you can get, I guess nylon it is too, hot tents, and they are way lighter. Um, but the problem with them is that they don't breathe. So you wake up and like the whole tent is absolutely covered in frost from your breath just building up, and then you bump the tent and it's like snowing inside your tent, right? So, but they do pack up and are super light. There's various manufacturers that make canvas tents of all sizes. Capital Canvas. I just picked up a Capital Canvas wall tent that was huge, 16 by 14. Obviously, you're not going to be hauling that by hand, but that's a good Canadian manufacturer. Snow Trekker Tents is great too. So yeah. Oh, thanks for the donation. Merry Christmas, Adam Cole. Anyway, so yeah, so I've been, since I started a family, Tori and I have been getting out and exploring sort of areas by snowmobile. We really can't get into our cabin without a snowmobile. Hey, buddy, I love you too. Yeah, sure, sure. So Daddy's trying to do something right now, bud. So, anyways, that's really fun for the kids too, and we can really get in, and also with my kid with disabilities. I love you, bud. Um, thanks, bud. Nice hug. With my son Wesley, who has disabilities, having the snowmobile is great, and you can just haul more stuff. I can bring in some wood. I can bring in a large tent, a good wood stove. Bring in some of that heavier gear, and we with the huge Yukon expedition sled that I have, which is amazing. You can just like kind of bring in the kitchen sink. But you can also get yourself into trouble in a snowmobile too, especially if you get in really deep and you have mechanical breakdowns. The snowmobiles are heavier too, so you got to be more careful. Heavier than just walking, right? So you got to be more careful about ice conditions and all these sorts of things as well. So, like for example, on my Scandic, I have a snowmobile that can actually pull a lot of weight, and I have a winch on it. I'm actually getting a block heater put into it, so I don't have any issues with it starting in deep cold, and that kind of thing. Oh, mommy's calling you, Huddy. Yeah, so I don't have any issues with it starting in deep cold. That's the camera over there, bud. You're on TV right now. Yeah, yeah, love you, bud. Um, so you don't have any issues starting in deep cold. But yeah, if you want to get into that, I'd learn some basic mechanical things when it comes to snowmobiles and your specific machine, how it works, and you could really go on and on, about that whole side of things. But yeah, the core from winter camping, if you have a snowmobile, for example, you can bring a small chainsaw. And you can travel like that. Definitely a different way to travel, but the same kind of things are important when it comes to your comfort, staying warm, how you dress for the most part, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's kind of for the most part all I sort of had planned on covering when it comes to winter camping, or just winter in general. But oh, except for fishing, it's really hard to have time to do any ice fishing when you're on a winter camping trek and you're breaking camp every night. Even if you are planning to make it a significant distance by snowmobile, it's hard to really have the time unless you really plan for it to stop and ice fish. But ice fishing can be a lot of fun. And it's really just cool. It's a cool feeling pulling a fish out through this hole in the ice and keeping it, or having a little fish fry on your wood stove. One of the other good things about winter camping is you don't have to worry about bears to the same extent, so you can eat inside your tent. And but the issue with that is that as you're trekking, you get to camp, it's getting dark. You ideally want to fish in, the evening time before dark, and so you're setting up your tent, you're cutting wood, and you have no time really to sit there and actively fish at all. And plus, it takes a long time to cut a hole through the ice and bust out your rod and rig it up and start jigging. And so a lot of the time, it just isn't something you do. So I actually, that when you're on a point A to B trek and when you're breaking camp every night, so one of the things that I tried that worked great is I actually bought a little lure that had a propeller on it. And so you have to charge this little minnow lure, and the propeller goes like whoop, whoop, and it swims like erratically, right? And the other thing you can also do is they're hard to pick up, but you can have like a little rod stand that auto jigs like this. So you put your rod in it and it goes like this, and that way you can drill an ice hole. A lot of the time when you're on a trek as well, a point A to B trek, you are camping on the ice. A great thing to do is find a back bay where there's a bunch of standing dead trees from a beaver swamp, or beaver swamp is amazing because then you have all those dead trees, or back bay sometimes where the water has been higher in a given lake at times. You'll see a bunch of standing dead trees in the shallows close to shore. Spots like that are amazing to camp because there's such easy access to firewood. But a lot of the time, you're not camping in the typical summer spot where you would camp when you're on a canoe trip. And also, some of those spots can be quite high. It's very hard to haul all your stuff in a toboggan up there, or very hard to get a snowmobile up a steep incline like that to camp in those spots. So a lot of the time you end up camping on the ice, or in sort of a shallow, swampy area, more or less ice. Another good thing to keep in mind too is the way you point your chimney. If you have any wind, and sometimes you're not using a chimney that goes straight up. You're using a chimney with a bit of a crook in it, like that. You're supporting it with a couple of sticks like this, and that means that the ash or the coals or any sparks don't fall back down in your tent, which are an issue, especially when you're burning softwood. So a good idea to always make sure you point that with the wind, away from the direction of the wind, not into the wind, because that wind can just blow down your chimney and smoke out your whole tent. So that's a really good tip, two tips to know where to set up camp. But yeah, so essentially when it comes to fishing, you're camping on the ice. So you can just auger a hole through the ice and put it, 20 meters away from where your tent's going to be. And as you're setting up your tent, you're right there, and your lure's an eye shot, and you have this auto jigging rod or this little electronic minnow lure that you have to charge those. But anyways, yeah. So I actually used that, and I actually managed to slam a nice lake trout one day, which was super exciting. With that, rod up, and just keeping an eye on it, and as you're setting up the tent, all of a sudden got one. You run over, and we ran over and landed it. That was pretty exciting. And then the other couple tips too, when it comes to winter camping and ice fishing, is in areas where you're allowed to use minnows. Now you have to be careful. This is a commercial again. Okay, sorry. I guess I can nowadays. YouTube's putting ads in a live chat. They didn't used to do that. Anyways, so uh yeah, so you can bring in minnows, right? So here's a wicked tip. If you're doing a winter camping trip, how do you realistically bring minnows? You got to make sure that you're in the same fisheries management zone. You can't transport live bait outside of your fisheries management zone, so just keep that in mind. um, but what I do is I get one of those coolers. It's like about 6 inches wide, and it's just like a little cooler like this. Put the minnows in there. If you throw, some snow in every once in a while, it'll help aerate them. The cool temperature will keep the minnows from dying. And because it's got a screw on lid, if that dumps over, it won't leak out. All the water won't leak out. And you can actually buy a little Freebill or Frabill bubbler that actually floats in there. That's it's got a battery in it, and the engine's got an O-ring, so it seals shut, and it'll bubble and aerate that water. It's sort of shaped like a cone, almost shaped like a funnel, and you pop that right in there, and that'll just bubble, and it'll keep all your minnows alive for days on end. It's amazing. But even if you don't have that little aerator, you can put a dozen minnows in there. You're going winter camping for a few days. A few of them might die, but you're going to end up with a few lively live fish for sure. And that's one of the ways I've managed to just get amazing fish. Trout and stuff while I'm on like winter camping trips with my kids and my wife. Like winter camping and ice fishing, I mean, is not really like a little kids thing. But what my wife and I do, we'll go out there and we'll get a little fire going, and which is apparently illegal to have a fire right on the ice. So you have to have like a little base or put the fire on shore or whatever. But anyways, yeah. So then we'll drill a few holes and put minnows on them. That way we can just have the holes right beside us, and we can be roasting up hot dogs or drinking hot chocolate, and all of a sudden the kids will be, oh, we got a fish, and then you run over and then pull the fish in, so you don't have to be managing kids while you're also jigging, and the kids aren't getting bored jigging. So it's a lot more fun that way. And yeah, it's the other thing is too, the if you have a hand auger, they're usually about 6 inches around like that, and that hand auger is the same the hand auger bit or blade and flight extension is the same width as one of those 6-inch wide coolers. So you can just dunk that in through the ice hole and refill it and get fresh aerated water in there for your minnows. So yeah, super good tip. Bring one of those things out there. Awesome. Anyways, yeah, and then for me, Williams jigging spoons, white tube jigs are go to. I caught fish on the little Rapala jigging lure. I catch a lot on spoons and minnows. I'm using minnows a lot now that I traveling a lot with snowmobiles. I have the freaking Frabil bait station. It's called. This thing is amazing. It's got a built-in engine. It's like a cooler with an O-ring around the top and then a built-in net. So you flip that open and you just pull the net up. The net is like a liner. Pull the net up, all your minnows in there, you put it down, and it's got like a built-in motor to aerate it, and it's got an O-ring, so if it tips over, all the water doesn't spill out and all your minnows don't die. So yeah, that's pretty cool product for sure. Really like it. Anyways, I've been yabbering on here for a bit. Let's see what time we got here. 8:40. So yeah, solid little thing. Hopefully everybody enjoyed some little kind of tips and tricks there about winter camping, getting out in the winter. Lots of fun. I really enjoyed. I'm really looking forward to this season and everything I have planned. Me, Tori, and the kids are going to try to do a big snowmobile ride from here all the way, or starting from close to our house all the way to our cabin. I'm actually going to be going to Labrador as well to meet up with my buddy Jamie, who lives in Labrador. I went moose hunting with him in Newfoundland, and probably me and my brother Ted are going to get together and explore some backcountry lakes where we went trout fishing this last spring as well. So yeah, a bunch of other things in between. And for the shoulder season, I think me and Hudson might get out somewhere closer to home and do something, build a Quincy shelter or something like that. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to grab, I have a little screen here, and into this screen is where my questions are coming in. So I can see everyone's questions here now. That's awesome. Live chat. Okay, this is a lot of fun. I like doing these things. Thanks everyone for coming in here and being a part of this. It's just a really fun way I can actually directly interact and connect with people, because at the end of the day, if it wasn't for all your support and your time and comments and watching my videos and binge watching all that, I wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. I wouldn't be able to get it done. So I'm just appreciative that everybody spreads the good word and enjoys my content. So anyways, without further ado, I will ask some questions. If anybody has some specific questions, they're just coming into my feed right here. I don't have anybody vetting them. Oh yeah, thanks, Xander. Thanks, buddy. Me and Xander are doing a company Christmas party with the guy that edits our videos. Yeah, Xander. Geez, I don't know what's best for you. Probably 8:30. Let's do 8:30, buddy. Yeah. 5:30 is too early for dinner. I'm not even gonna be hungry. Okay, minnows. All right. Yeah. All right. Griffin said, yeah, and he made a donation of $1.99. That's worth a yeah for sure. Your vids are great. First saw you on a loan. Yeah, that was quite the experience. Well, I'm standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona. Such a fun sight to see. Brandon, what's up? So I just got a message here from Brandon Warner. He's the guy Ted and I did the Grand Canyon with earlier in June, which was just an epic trip. Here's one. How far will you go on the snowmobile in one day towards your camp? Yeah, to ride from here with the kids in one day on the snowmobile, that's a good question. Like, if it's just me and Tori, we can push it. Like, me and Tori did a pretty big ride last winter, stayed in some cabin up in the bush, up not too far from Eagle Lake. And, it all depends on how fast you can ride and the conditions. But, I'm gonna say like 100 kilometers in a day is pretty reasonable, with the kids along, and a probably good amount of that traveling is gonna be on trails where you can go. We're not going to be breaking trail or going over super rough, bumpy ice. Like you saw me and Buck Miller had to do that up on James Bay when we were riding to Hudson Bay last winter. We ran some really bumpy conditions and we couldn't go fast. Um, so yeah, I think that like I don't think 100 kilometers. We'll call it 50 to 100 kilometers to be safe, but it's all going to depend. So some days might be 150, and some days might be 50. But I haven't really jumped into the planning on that, so I'll let you know as we get closer to. Um, what's the moment you didn't capture on camera that you wish you had? Man, there's been a lot of those moments, but I think one of the most amazing things was the first time our dog North met Wesley. Um, we went and picked up North. Who's the same age as Hudson, and we went up, funnily enough, right into the same area where we ended up buying our water access camp. And we brought North home, and Wesley was like lying on the ground on like a big cushion, and North as a puppy was immediately like drawn to Wesley and was playing with him and kind of lay on his back and was licking his face, and Wesley was laughing and North was snorkeling him and snuggling him, and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. And so I bust out my phone and I'm watching, and then I realized I wasn't filming. So, if anybody ever seen the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and Sean Penn's in that movie, and he's like this elusive, kind of deep, old school sort of photographer. And there's one part of the movie where he was trying to film snow leopards in some remote mountain wilderness. And he's trying to film these like snow leopards for days and days and days to shoot them. And finally, him and Walter Mitty finally finds him, and these snow leopards walk right into his frame, and he decides not to film them, and he doesn't take the picture. He takes no pictures. And his point was sometimes he just wants this pure experience to take that. And you know what, if you ever are somebody that wants to get that good picture and gets bummed out where that you didn't get a shot, just remember that, because to be honest with you, even I've heard of people even doing trips where they don't bring a camera. And I remember there's times where I've seen something really cool, and instead of enjoying it in the moment, you're like, oh damn it, I don't have my camera, or you don't take the time to watch this beautiful thing because you turn around, you run back to get your camera, and you run back and it's gone, and you say, darn, and now you're mad, and you just kind of messed up this blissful, perfect situation and experience that you could have had, which you could have connected with. So don't get mad if you don't have your camera. That being said, I remember one of the main producers when we were on Alone season 4, he said, listen, if something cool happens to you guys out there, and you didn't film it, don't even tell me. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know, because I think he'd been sick of stories of people telling these crazy things. One guy told the story about he was sitting on a beach and a wolf trotted right past him and stopped and looked at him from 10 feet away and then scurried off, and he didn't have his camera, and the producer's like, oh cool, where's the footage? He's like, oh, I didn't film it. And he's like, right. So so if you go on Alone, you probably should try to capture anything. Okay, I'll get to another couple questions here. Name of the fly-in company you use to get to the Wolf River. Can they bring me exactly where they dropped you off? Yeah, 100% they can. And either way, if you're planning on paddling the Wolf River, you will go past that spot anyways because that's the outflow of the river. So that's Alpine Air right out of Whitehorse. There's also, so you saw that site. There was like a fire ring there, and obviously the fishing was incredible. So obviously the lodge, there's a lodge on Wolf Lake, nowhere around there where you can see it, but obviously they've been doing a incredible job of preserving that fishery through catch and release and whatever else they're doing there. But the thing is, though, that if you go to that spot in season, there's a good chance there might be other people from the lodge fishing there. I think the lodge mainly focuses on like big lake trout, though. But yeah, if you go there in September, you're not going to see anybody. Um, which piece of gear it or which piece of gear earns its place in your backpack every single trip, no matter what? I'm gonna say a Bic lighter. I know that's kind of a lame, thing to say. Obviously, like a paddle, right? Like stuff like that. But I think like your best survival tool is like a good lighter. A Bic lighter, if it dunks in the water, it'll take a while to like dry out and light. There are tricks to get it going, but it will eventually dry off and light. It can break, which is bad. But still, like I don't mess around now. Actually, you got to be careful because the airlines are starting to crack down. They won't let you travel with lighters in your pack luggage. So if anyone's doing a trip where they have to say fly commercially to the Northwest Territories or to the Yukon or wherever, and they got to get on a commercial flight, you're only allowed a certain amount of lighters, and they have to be on your person in your pocket. Um, so now you might want to just make sure you pick some up when you get to a community. Most northern communities will sell lighters for sure, right? But I like to, before a trip, buy one of those packets of Bic lighters, get them at like the checkout line at Canadian Tire. Freaking throw one in my camera case, throw one in my dry bag, throw one in my food barrel, throw one in like every bag. Keep one waterproofed on me in one of my pockets. So if I dump, I'll immediately have a dry lighter. Keep another one in my other pocket. And yeah, I think that's a key survival tool. Um, yeah, right where that fire ring was. Yeah, you'll get it. Yeah, the lighter's a good bottle opener. That's true too. But I mean, if you're bringing glass bottles out there, but it works great for opening bottles. That's for sure. Uh, When you come to a lake in the winter and you know it's full of slush, how do you navigate it without trouble? It's like honestly, like you don't, having snowshoes definitely works. If you're going to be going through a lot of slush and you're going to be hitting a lot of slush, might be a good idea to bring um insulated rubber boots as well. But I think the best thing that you can kind of do is, especially if you have a lot of people, you go and you start hitting the slush, instead of just forcing and trudging through it. One person goes one way, another person goes the other way, and you try to kind of get around it as best you can. And you'll probably still hit a little bit, but essentially just trying to, oh, the slush is getting really bad, back up a bit. Let's try going left. Ooh, that's bad. Let's try going right. And if you have more people trying to just like circumvent that slush around, by getting to the left or right is the best way to do it. But yeah, it can be challenging. I know people that wear more traditional like footwear, like mucklucks or kamiks and stuff like that, or Steger mucklucks and stuff like that, that don't have any rubber at the bottom. That's when you break out your Neo's overshoe. And yeah, Neo's overshoes are just like essentially winter boots that you just put over your other boots. So bringing a pair of those is really good as well. Um, Bic lighter and PFD dry suit every bag. I would say so for sure. Yeah. Like, right. Like I can light a bow drill fire. I know how to light a bow drill fire, right? But if you're on a remote trip and you're lighting bow drill fires, something went wrong. The more confident you are to light a fire, the safer you are out there, right? But like you can get fancy and I'm not saying don't learn how to light a fire with a ferro rod in wet conditions and all that. It's really good to read up on how to do that and even practice it. But at the end of the day, just don't mess around. Just bring a bunch of freaking lighters. Um, do you ever try 2 flies on at the same time? Have I ever tried tying on 2 flies at the same time? No, I haven't. That sounds pretty cool though. Some places maybe like for Atlantic salmon fishing in Quebec, you probably wouldn't be allowed to do that. But most places, yeah, you might be able to. I think that sounds like a pretty cool idea. I've never I've never actually done a ton of fly fishing. So, there's all kinds of tips like that I learned just from people in the comments and from research, but I freaking love it. Like the Wolf River, the fly fishing, hands down, way more fun. So exciting. Brandon, hey Brandon, Brandon's asking, do you bring a carbon monoxide detector in your tent? So that is a good idea. I don't bring a carbon monoxide detector in my tent when I have a stove that has a chimney because essentially the draft in your chimney is bringing oxygen and take into your tent and bringing the carbon monoxide outside of your tent because the draft in the chimney is what feeds the fire with oxygen. Plus, on top of that, you're using a canvas tent which breathes. These canvas tents are always well ventilated. They have large vents, and typically they have no floor as well. But a lot of people are winter camping and ice fishing pop-up shelters. And they're using those propane buddy heaters. Absolutely freaking mandatory to bring a carbon monoxide detector like that in a tent if you're not using something with a chimney. You can buy a propane, it's like a wood stove, a propane stove that fits in these tents. Like the Arctic oven tents have a little zipper to run a propane line, and they have a chimney going out the top. But as soon as you don't have a chimney, you're going to have to bring a carbon monoxide detector. Those little buddy heaters, they have they have a detector on them. It's like the opposite of a carbon monoxide detector. So what you want to do is you want to bring both, and don't mess around because you could literally die. uh, go back to Baffin Island, first time, long time. Thank you. Right on. I love Baffin Island. What a cool place. And here in Western Alberta, fly fishing is a religion. Absolutely. Wow. The beautiful scenery you guys have there is very, very cool. I actually caught an illegal bull trout by accident in Alberta one time in the Sulphur River. You're not supposed to target them there, but yeah, what a backdrop. Uh, you often bring lots of handmade dehydrated meals that look great and supplement with lots of fish. But when you have to buy freeze dried meals, are you looking for anything in particular re calories? Yeah, you know what, especially those trips like the Mountain House freeze dried meals, which are pretty good. They don't have a ton of calories. The dehydrated meals, like you saw me and my brother do on the Hood River up in the Arctic, I dehydrated a lot of my food. Ted actually sprung and bought freeze dried food. You can buy a freeze dryer, but they're like 3,500 bucks. The difference in weight was substantial. Me and Ted had packed and planned the exact same amount of calories. Ted's food barrel with the same amount of calories as my food barrel was heavier, noticeably heavier for sure. So, hands down, freeze dried meals are lighter than dehydrated meals. There's another kind of I forget what it's called, expedition something. It's like I haven't looked at them for a while, but it's sort of like an orange packet, an orange logo that looks like it has a little globe on it. Those are the dehydrated meals that are made specifically for like hardcore polar explorers. So they are the most calorie rich dehydrated meals. You might pay for more for them, but are you really paying more per calorie is the question, right? Like Mountain House is not cheap either, or Alpine Air and all these things. They're not cheap either. But I think my favorite that I've ever tried is Happy Yak. They're a Canadian company out of Quebec. Really good recipes. The food tastes real, and higher calorie level as well. I think my like curried shrimp was like the best one of those I tried. But check out Happy Yak. You won't be disappointed. Much higher calories, really good eating as well. And it's not outrageously spendy either. Um, Will you be going on any of the big and interesting camping trips with happy camper Kevin Collins? I think you mean Kevin Callan. No, I've never actually planned a trip with Kevin before. A lot of the time I'm doing these like big northern adventures, but it's funny you should, and Kevin's not usually going up to the Yukon and Northwest Territories or Nunavut and all these kind of places. And he's not so into like the whitewater as I am, but man, is the guy ever well traveled and super super experienced with everything he does. It'd be cool to get out on a trip with him, so maybe I should do that. We could do a little YouTube collab. uh can't even buy a buddy heater in Massachusetts. Got to go to Canadian Tire to get them. Wild. Wow. You might be able to buy another small type of propane heater there. They're bulky, but I know you can buy these like diesel heaters. Not something you're going to want to haul by your hand. The buddy heaters are so light, right? And you can also have an attachment to connect a buddy heater to a 20-pound propane tank too, if you don't have far to go. But yeah, people are using like diesel heaters now as well. Barriers in winter boots for winter expeditions. I Are you talking about like I just wear bags around my feet, Ziploc bags? The other thing you can wear too is Gore-Tex socks. That's going to do the same thing, but the bags on top of my socks are really slick, so I do not get blisters. Uh, if someone wants to get more comfortable on solo trips, what's the first small step you'd recommend? I don't know, but I think just like I think you got to just like try to do something a little easier, a little closer to home. And a lot of the fears people have is just like being out there alone. What about bears and all that? And that kind of fear doesn't go away until you've spent at least like 10 days out there. You know what I mean? Check out the Gunnerson Gorge in Colorado. Sounds wicked. Thanks, Griffin. But yeah, it doesn't usually go away till you get out there. But I think my first solo whitewater trip, or definitely my first solo whitewater trip, was the Lower Madawaska. So good rapids. I did it, there back then it wasn't as well traveled, and I did it think later in the season too. But it was a blast, and that's a spot where there's other people. If you have to walk out, it's not the end of the world. It's not super remote. The rapids aren't crazy advanced. But I think self rescue is important to learn. Like how are you going to be able to rescue your canoe? I use I think what they call the Alberta, essentially, where you have your throw bag underneath a bungee cord at the bow and stern of the boat, and the rope to the throw bag is connected with a carabiner clipped to the tow handle of your boat. So if you dump, you immediately grab a throw bag, and now your canoe's on the end of a throw bag, and you swim to shore. And wrap that throw bag around a tree or something. And we're talking about whitewater, like moving water trips as well. But yeah, I think uh, things take longer too, because when you're traveling with two people, let's say you get to camp, okay, you set up the tent, I'll get the fire going. well, you got to do everything yourself. And winter camping takes way longer. Winter camping by yourself, you got to set up everything. It's just way longer. But I think what you want to focus on is pay more attention. Now, this is especially important in winter, especially in the Arctic. You pay more attention to shelter, fire, water, food. That's the three main things of survival, right? First, you get a fire go. First, you get shelter. Then you get a fire going, right? Then you worry about water. Then you worry about food. Like as in the winter, instead of getting to camp and just bumming around and drilling fishing holes and doing nothing, you should probably get there and get your tent set up right away. Get that really, because bad weather can move in. Somebody might get wet, something, you're always just safe to pay more attention. And I think it's more dangerous going solo. I mean, this is the truth, right? And so I would definitely just be a little more careful when it comes to your own preservation, and just kind of focus a little bit more on those core fundamentals of survival. Get your getting your tent set up and stuff like that off the hop. That's probably good advice. What clothing do you bring to stay dry, warm? So yeah, I talked about clothing when it comes to winter a little bit, but typically I'm wearing like a merino wool base layer, a thick gauge like long johns. Then on top of that, I'm going to be wearing like a wool pants are great. And if you I don't really wear snow pants a whole lot, but if you have like a wind breaking outer layer, then you're doing pretty good. And you can get into the insulated pants and the down pants, and that's all good too. I typically don't really wear those. I just layer up on pants, and then I have a wind breaking pair. If you bring something like Gore-Tex Pro, that's as breathable as possible, but Gore-Tex isn't really mind-bogglingly great in the cold in the winter. So if you can, don't worry so much about waterproof as much as breathability, if you want to layer. But when you're winter camping, especially further south, having rain or freezing rain is a fairly serious concern, too. So having a good wind breaking layer that's also somewhat waterproof along isn't a bad idea. Then you're going to wear, I like to layer up, so I'll wear again a base layer. Then I'll wear like maybe a thicker sweater, then another sweater on top of that. Then I'll wear a down puffer. Then I wear my anorak. That's what I've been rolling with lately. And then you know what? If it's too hot, you pull off the down puffer and you just wear your anorak on top of that. That's a really awesome layering strategy. And then I go with a good pair of mitts, not gloves. I don't go with liners in my gloves. A lot of people like to have like a little liner around their fingers, but when it's skin on skin, it's warmer. If you have liners in your mitts, it's nice when you pull your hand out to be able to work on things and stuff, but oftentimes those just get wet anyways. So yeah, mitts with skin on skin is the way to go inside a really warm pair of mitts. And then a neck warmer makes all the difference for sure. And a good toque, good thick warm toque or a fur hat. What's the moment from an expedition that you still think about years later, either because it taught you something or humbled you? What's the moment from an expedition that you think of years later because it taught you something or humbled you? I don't know. That's a good question. I can't really think of something like that. I have one kind of crazy story though. I remember when I was crossing the Angava Peninsula in the winter. I was in Kangaksuyua, and there's these other guys, these local guys that were kind of helping me, and I was chatting with them, and they were pretty experienced for sure. And they're saying how somebody else had tried to do this trip a few years back, and they had to go and rescue him on day two, and he got lost in a blizzard, and somehow I don't know, his GPS broke or froze or I don't know what, and it was a disaster, and he had to get saved. And there I was on day two freaking in a dangerous situation, stuck in a freaking blizzard. And I'd never really had to build a snow block wall before. And so, you watch like some videos or you research how to build a snow block wall. And okay, no problem. I can build a snow block wall. I have to build that wall to block the wind so I can get my tent up. Otherwise, you can't get your tent up in a blizzard and you might freeze to death. Well, I didn't realize that you have to chop the snow blocks out. I thought you could just like stab your knife in and kind of saw back and forth. And a lot of people actually bring small hand saws, which is a really good thing to have. A small hand saw is really the way to go when trying to cut snow blocks out of hard packed drifts. And I remember sitting there trying, and it's this blasting wind and it's dark and it's like really dangerous. I'd worked up a sweat. And finally I was like, oh, I can't do it. I can't cut these snow blocks. And I'm like, damn it. And I just like punched down on the snow with my knife in my hand. And I looked down and realized that I punched and chopped. And I'm like, that's how you do it. And right before that, I said a prayer too. And it just was crazy because right at that moment, I accidentally figured out how to do it on my own. And I guess what that teaches us is that there's a lot of nuances behind these things, right? And that's the difference between practical experience and reading up on something. So and that's an interesting lesson for sure, and that's why so many of these kind of how survival skills are very important, but it's so much more mental than anything. And I find that's really where the survival books and the instructors and the courses and all this thing, they don't really cover any of that because it's all psychology. So, like for example, um, well, I just told you right back there. I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone. I just said, well, you focus on shelter, water, fire, food, right? Those are four things. But before that, they'll always say the first thing is don't panic. Okay. Then you worry about shelter, water, fire, food. Don't panic is the hardest thing by far of any of those things in a lot of situations. Practicing survival skills is fun in your backyard where you're doing it for fun. Hey, can you get a bow drill fire going? And oh, it's raining. Let's go inside and have some popcorn or whatever. Real survival skills when you're like worried you're going to die and it's wet and you're hypothermic and you're trying to light a bow drill fire is traumatizing, right? Like traumatizing. Yeah, anchor. Cool. Yeah, so that is something to think about, right? Is the don't panic thing. And that's the difference between experience and not. I mean, it's very hard to just learn how to just deal with the temperature, the uncomfortableness from a book, from a YouTube video. It's the kind of thing that can only be learned by experience. But I do think that some more thought can go into the whole don't panic thing. Like there's been so many stories where someone died because they panicked, right? And I've been there before too, right? Like I'm bushwhacking on a compass bearing through the bush. I should have been there by now. It's getting dark. Why aren't we there by now? Why aren't we there by now? You stop and think, right? Like if you get turned around, same thing. Stop and think, okay, well, I know that I'm in an area where to the north is a hydro slash. I know that to the south of me by 3 kilometers is a road. I know that it's all kind of boxed in a bit by a lake shore, which is to the east of me. So as long as I don't walk west, I'll be fine. I just have to make sure I can walk in a straight line long enough, right? And how can I walk in a straight line? Well, let's think of some cues from the environment around me, the sunrise, the sunset, the way the tops of a white pine tree are pointing. prevailing winds, and moss on the tree. You don't want to go off those ones really, but or do I follow a creek to a body of water? What if I follow this creek? It's going to lead to the large lake because I know there's no other lakes around here, and then I know along that lake shore there's a cabin, right? And you really got to stop and think, and that's one of the things that nobody ever talks about. The Hunter Ed course, when I took it in Ontario, actually did the best job at sort of covering that, but nobody else really does. Anyways, absolutely. Thanks for answering my question. No problem. We love you, Jim. Keep being cool, a cool dude. I'll do my best. Um, heart helps with don't panic. Take deep breaths and control heat rate. Oh, heat helps with don't panic. Yeah, that's a good tip. Thank you. Let's see. Heart rate. Absolutely. So somebody's just saying heart rate helps with not panicking. Yeah, stop, sit down, take a deep breath. You know what I mean? Like just don't panic is the first thing you have to do. And the reason they say don't panic is because when you're panicking, you can't think straight, right? What's your record for black flies killed with one clap? 52. Yeah, that was in Labrador. 52. The guy from Outdoor Boys has a snow saw. Yeah, those snow saws are great. Those are the ones mountain climbers use. I've never seen any of those, mountain climbing MSR saws up in the Arctic. I just see the little crosscut lumber saws work just fine. Hand warmers. Somebody saying good idea to pack hand warmers. Absolutely. Toe warmers are great to have too. Great for the kids as well. Having the toe warmers. I don't even mess around. I just swap them out on the kids every 4 or 5 hours. Do you guys carry a gun for protection? I definitely don't. Typically, unless I'm hunting, I don't carry a gun. Although I do carry one when I'm in grizzly and or polar bear territory. When solo, I think it's a good idea to carry one. In the winter, unless I'm in polar bear country, I don't, because typically bears are hibernating. Although that sometimes if there is a grizzly bear that's out of its den, grizzly bears don't hibernate as much as black bears. And a winter bear can be a pretty scary thing. So some people might, but I typically don't around here. Hey Jim, I wrapped up the Teslin River Yukon with my wife, 4-year-old son, and 6-year-old daughter. We had an awesome time. And any recommendations for a Teslin like river for my family of four? In the Yukon, maybe the Pelly. There might be some bigger rapids, but if you do it later in the season, it might be pretty straightforward. Then of course there's the Yukon River itself. Maybe the Nisetland. You might want to check on the Nisetland as well, too. That's a pretty cool one as well. I haven't done that one though. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. Me and my kids, we did the Stikine. I don't know. It's the Stikine's a lot pushier with like strong current. No, there's some, I wouldn't call it any like serious rapids. There were some rapids, but all just had like a super easy line down them. And even with a heavily loaded canoe, I don't think we even took in any water. We had low water, but so just with caution, I would say check out the lower Stikine, but just with caution as well. But it's freaking breathtakingly cool. Be more expensive than the Teslin because you have to get or if you have more time, you can take the Alaska Marine Highway system from Wrangell up to Skagway, get picked up from Skagway out of Whitehorse, and get dropped off in in Telegraph Creek from Whitehorse too. If you get that, it's a big shuttle. So, or you can get jet boated back upriver. So there's a few options, but it's like absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, like knocks the Tesla out of the park. Just glaciers, giant mountains, waterfalls, like giant trees, but really cool. It rains a lot though. Uh, Peak Refuel is another good food brand. Someone's saying. What time we got here? Oh, it's about 20 after. Okay, I'll do a couple. It's been an hour. Um, Dream Fish. Somebody's saying. What about Tamian? Those giant freaking like they're like salmonids, but they almost look like a combination between a muskie and a salmon that live in like Siberia. That'd be pretty cool. I also have seen these people fly fishing giant dorado in the rainforest. That seems like a pretty epic dream fish too. I never knew smallies were invasive. We have them in our rivers and man-made reservoirs in New England. We love them. They're fighters. Yeah, I guess smallmouth bass have been stocked a very long time ago, but even in Ontario, they weren't native to anywhere other than the Great Lakes and like pretty much immediately adjacent lakes. And, obviously rivers as far up as they kind of could go where the habitat allowed. But what happened was back in the day, they were just, especially when trains went through certain areas, they were stocked heavily all over the place. At one time, they were much bigger on average, but they've eaten themselves smaller as well. And that really laid a real smackdown on a lot of the trout populations. A lot of that was for tourism, because when people could come up to Canada and go on a fishing vacation, it was the summer, and trout fishing in the summer is much harder, like brook trout fishing. So it's only really good in the spring and fall. So essentially, all those native brook trout lakes, and probably the same thing happened in New Zealand, got destroyed by the introduction of bass. But yeah, smallmouth bass are real fun to catch. Holy shit, good info. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Uh, Smallmouth bass ruined the trout fishing. Cry face. Couldn't agree with you more. And the worst is when somebody goes, and there was this beautiful, pristine, cold water lake up where my family's water access cottage was. My dad and grandfather built that. My grandfather caught like a giant speckled trout out of there, freak show big. It was like this legendary lake. It got fished pretty much, hit too hard, and then some idiot local guy went and stocked it full of largemouth bass, which are like not even it's not, they don't even grow big in that lake because it's this cold water, not swampy lake. So yeah, some people just blow it. The somebody saying that government tried stocking bass in Alberta, but they never took. Zero bass in Alberta. Yeah, it's probably just, yeah, probably good reason for it. Bass are pretty fun, but I mean, at the end of the day, and don't get me wrong, they're great, especially they're easier to catch on average, but man, freaking catching just beauty trout. I love the wall. I love everything, but just catching some of these beauty, like these Alberta, these cutthroats, these native Athabasca cutthroats, the varying colors. Like trout is like addictive to people. A brook trout, my favorite of all time. I love it. I love it all though. Hey Jim, let's get real. How do you put up uh, or adapt to the stink of sharing a tent with others in a small tent after weeks on a trip? LOL. I don't really notice it, to be honest with you. You know, I don't know, probably because I smell so bad. I'm just worried they can't smell me. We love your work. Thank you. You're very welcome. Uh, Trout jumps and head shakes and gator rolls can be next level. Oh, and then salmon fishing is just, oh, it's like Atlantic salmon fishing. The best fish I've ever caught was a 15 and a half pound on the scale Atlantic salmon, like just game changing, exciting, like just so cool. Golden trout in the high mountains. That would be really cool to go for. Well, I think maybe I'm going to shut her down, everybody. I really appreciate everybody here. Yeah, wow, it went by so fast, guys. Really fun to interact with everybody. We've been talking for an hour and 23 minutes. Every try fishing like catfish or setting traps for crayfish. I haven't. I'd love to though. Anyways, yeah, let's jump back on here tomorrow night. I'm doing another Q&A too. So any questions you guys want to ask, go for it. And yeah, tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Um, Appreciate it. I can't wait to get out there. I'm going to jump off with as soon as the ice is good in my neck of the woods, I'm going to jump off with a winter ice fishing for trout trip. I'm looking really forward to that, but you should see me get out here and do something a little closer to home before that. I got a really awesome trip, a really awesome video where me and my son Hudson closed up our camp for the winter, and ran into some issues and had to ATV into it on a trapline trail, which is a freaking gong show. My Newfoundland trip coming up. And then next year, guys, if you thought this year was good for my videos, just wait till what you see I have planned for 2026. Anyways, hope to see everyone tomorrow. Yeah.